Welcome, everyone, to the Co-Creators Convergence Thursday Night Creator Convo. I'm Noel Marshall, and I'm here with my beloved.
Hi, everyone. Great to have you here for another Thursday evening conversation. Byron, again, bringing his gift to the shift in humanity that Barbara Marx Hubbard invited all of us to do at all times to our community. Thank you, Byron, for being with us again. Really looking forward to this evening. This is going to be wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you, Bob and Noel. I love you guys. You are world servers. It's great to be with you.
That's the kind of company we like to keep, Byron. So looking at you.
It's mutual.
So we're going to be learning about the gospel of Jesus and the art of living according to the Urantia Revelation. So welcome, everyone. Those of you on Facebook, you are welcome to join us in the actual Zoom room itself. I got to tell you, I'm going to tell you more about Byron in just a few minutes, but he has written many books. He's been studying this for decades. He is an expert. He is well sought after speaker on this topic, even some others. And it's just a delight to have him in our circle of dear friends. So welcome everyone here, Byron. Love to have you back. So before we begin, and I give a more formal introduction of Byron, I want to tell you a little bit about the Co-Creators Convergence. So please stand by. So that is a little bit about the Co-Creators Convergence. So welcome all. Now I want to tell you a little bit more about our friend Byron. Byron Belitsos is an award-winning publisher and the author or editor of many books, including Birth 2012 by Barbara Marx Hubbard, one of our great teachers, plus many titles related to the Urantia Book, including most recently, Your Evolving Soul, the Cosmic Spirituality of the Urantia Revelation, and is a winner of a Nautilus Silver Award. As a leading exponent of the Urantia Book, Byron has spoken widely on Urantia cosmology and spirituality, including appearances on GAIAM TV and Coast to Coast AM radio. He holds a BA in Intellectual History from the University of Chicago and MA in Systemic Theology at Union Theological Seminary. He was also an inaugural member of Ken Wilber's Integral Institute. And you can find more about Byron at rodaninstitute.org. And we're going to be learning more about Rodan tonight, who he was in Urantia Book in the Life of Jesus. And you can always reach Byron at originpress.com. And maybe he'll publish your book. So he's done it for so many and for himself. So welcome, everyone. And as we always do, we'd just like you to stay muted. You can keep your cameras on. You can put any questions or comments you have in the chat. All right, Byron, thank you so much for coming. And we have 90 minutes together. The last 20 to 30 minutes we'd like to have for interactions and questions. And I always have a lot, but please, everyone, there's so much to dig into here. And Byron is such a vibrant and informative. I mean, this it's like a genius guy when it comes to this topic. Probably some others too. But without any further babbling, Byron, over to you, my friend.
Well, thank you, my friend. And it's what an honor to be here. And I'm thrilled because we're among friends and we're from the same, kind of cut from the same cloth. We're all fans of Barbara Marx Hubbard. I knew Barbara pretty well, and we had quite a journey, she and I, together for a number of years. And in a way, this is dedicated to her because, she really has the core kind of idea of teaching that I'm giving. She already had that in her own teachings. And it's a particular part of the Urantia book, which reminds me a lot of Barbara's teaching. That's not the reason I chose it, but it just happens to be the case. And so I honor her and her memory tonight. But before we do it, I think we ought to do a little bit of silence, a little bit of silent time. And a lot of you are muted, but this is the idea of muting the mind chatter. So put it on mute, and we'll go a couple of minutes, and I'll say just a few things as we enter into this quiet moment, which is I'd like you to consider that there is an infinite source of all reality. It's eternal, it's infinite, it's benevolent, loving, and in your meditation, imagine that it comes to you and sort of it enlarges itself and you begin to focus on this eternal benevolent image until an actual person comes into view. An actually loving person comes into view in your mind's eye. So let's do that for a few minutes. So again, in your mind's eye, imagine that the divine personality, the eternal, infinite, loving deity, as you understand, him or her, the creator, imagine him or her coming to you as a person, as a human personality. Let's imagine that personality. What's that person look like as it comes into focus? So focus on that relationship. Let's go another minute. Try to feel your gratitude that there is such a divine person. Feel it in your heart and breathe into your heart and feel the gratitude and maybe a bit of joy and ecstasy that this benevolent, infinite being is coming to you. So, on a final step, imagine this benevolent, eternal, omniscient, omnipresent being as a person is entering into your heart of hearts, entering into you and taking residence. And allow the creator to take up residence and literally to sit in your heart and reside there. So just feel that. Feel the peace of knowing that eternity is there inside of you. as a gift. And now let's universalize that. Imagine that very same gifting is in everybody's heart. They may not know it, but everyone has the gift of the presence of God inside of them, already there, already guiding them, present to them, whispering to them. Allow that presence to be whispering to all of humanity. It's talking to us right now, all of us. The brotherhood, the sisterhood is infused with this infinite being of light. The light is intensifying in our hearts worldwide. Amen. And thank you, everybody. Thank you very, very much for going on this little journey. And so the verbal part of this is sort of articulating what that was, and sort of a kind of the backstory for that. And I have like sort of three main things among 1,000 I'd like to talk about, but I'm going to highlight three things tonight, and they have to do with my new endeavor, my new ministry, which is called the Rodan Institute. It's Rodan, and we highlight these three things among others. And one of them is just simply pointing people's attention to the Urantia book itself, which, if you're brand new to it, it's this big tome. It's 2,096 pages. This is big stuff, and it's like a lot of effort to get through it. But we think of it as a gift to humanity, and everybody that reads it has a different opinion, really. But in general, we all agree that it's something epically great about this text. And I spent 50 years with it, and I published a number of books about it. But in particular, I want to highlight the fourth part. So you got 2,000 pages is four parts. Part one is advanced. It's theology, it's cosmology, but it's an advanced cosmology, but it's not an esoteric cosmology. It's like a scientific presentation with theology wrapped around it. It's like reading Teilhard de Chardin. And in a real quick nutshell, the part one says that the universe has a center to it. It's an actual center. It's like almost like a geographical center of infinity. It's like a singularity that physicists talk about, right? But it's the ultimate singularity out of which all things come. It's source, the source. And think of it as our father, but it's also our mother, and it's the mother universe. So this universe has always been there, eternally been there as our mother, father source. So part one talks about that in great detail and talks about many other things. And part two is more about our local universe. So what do we mean by local universe? Well, we have now discovered that there are several trillion galaxies. So think of a galaxy as like a local universe, right? And when the Urantia book came through, we didn't even know that there was a Milky Way galaxy. You know, it was in the 20s when it started coming through. And the Urantia book said there were millions of galaxies out there. So nobody even knew that until Hubble discovered it in like 1929, that there was this galaxy that we're in, right? So a galaxy is like a local universe in a big universe of a couple trillion galaxies. So the part two of the Urantia book is about the local universe. It's our galaxy, but it's just like a subset of the galaxy. Part three is on the history of our planet. And I'm a trained historian, history of ideas and history of religion. This is a history of everything. It's like a complete history of our planet, and they named the planet Urantia. This is the name of the planet according to the celestial authors. Urantia, that's what has that funny name, Urantia Book. So it's about our history, and some of it is, you might say, esoteric history, particularly prehistory. It is not the same it's not the same prehistory as the ancient aliens on the History Channel. It's more sophisticated, more interesting. And then that's part three. It's really the history of Earth from the beginning of Earth and beginning of life, and says life was planted here by higher beings as single cells and then evolved in kind of Darwinian fashion for 5 billion years. And then part four is about the life of Jesus, life and teachings of Jesus. So the first of three points I want to make tonight is that there is this part four of the Urantia Book, which gives a new vision of who Jesus is that I have always been enthused about, and it's 770 pages, so it's a lot, but it's very readable, and I suggest people go there and take a look at it, because what it does is, if you were brought up in the Christian tradition, you read the New Testament, and it's rather inspiring stuff. It's unbelievably great, the four Gospels, especially. And so imagine now, 2,000 years later, Spirit, the Holy Spirit, wants to update things. This is what a loving parent would do, and wouldn't let you wait forever to get the latest news, right? So it's an update of the New Testament and a correction of it as well. And so what we're going to focus on is one part of that, one deeper part of it, because we have pretty advanced audience here. So we're going to get into this deeper area, which is called the art of living and its relationship to the gospel. So we're going to talk in the second principle I want to bring forward is the enhanced, corrected gospel of Jesus, and in particular the art of living in cooperation and co-creativity, as Barbara used to say, with the Spirit. And that's a beautiful thing, which is why we call it art. It's an art of living. And then the last thing I want to bring forth, if we have time, is the principle of personhood, personality, principle of personality, which is one of the great teachings of the Urantia Book, which is already resident in the universal Catholic tradition, universal Christian teaching. All denominations believe in the personhood of God, that God is present to us personally, presents God's self to us, and did that through this gift of sending a divine being to be on the planet. And so, but there's a deeper meaning to that, which we're going to get to, which is the sort of what distinguishes us, men and women, from the natural world, which is that we have personhood, which means we have freedom. We're free. We have free will. We have free thought. Our hearts are open if we want them open. Freely, we open ourselves, to love, to relationship. And that means personality. And personality also means communication, proper communication, civil communication, loving communication. And you can't have persons who aren't communicating. That would be like robots. Persons communicate, they form community, they form families, they form planet-wide families of brotherhood, sisterhood. And that brings us really to the restatement of the gospel of Jesus in the Urantia Book, which I guess I'll start with that now, which is that what you had in the New Testament, in this glorious teaching, I mean, really amazing, and sustains me itself, in itself. But it's a portion and not the whole, right? It's a portion of it, which the Urantia Book says it really happened because of Apostle Peter. Apostle Peter was an enthusiast. He was fervent, and he sort of adjusted the teachings and to exalt Jesus as the resurrected Savior, right? So made this into the gospel itself. Because when you think about it, his best friend, Jesus, who really saved his life and gave him everything and forgave him for everything, uh, was killed, and then resurrected. It's an unbelievable miracle. And so he exalted that, that this God man was killed and but then resurrected on the third day. So it's a religion about that. And then Paul enhances that. Apostle Paul enhances that, and so did other apostles. They kind of follow on that. But what the Ranch book says is that this was an unfortunate sort of marketing message, you might say, that was trying to get people in Jerusalem to really rise to the occasion, which is Jesus had risen, and that is a great truth. And so that it was laden with emotion and joy, and so it became a wonderful teaching. It was motivated, creating a whole new civilization. So we have to, be grateful for that. But there's kind of a minority report, you might say, which the Rancher book brings forward and states that the teachings of Jesus are not just about himself. Mainly, they're not really about himself. They're about the teaching of the art of living. It's about the gospel is about a way to live. It's a way, the Jesus way, as the early disciples called it. So it's a way of being in the world, right? It's not just sort of the worship of the Christ, which is a good idea, but it's not just that. And so the art of living is one way to put that. And I get that in particular from one part of the Urantia book. And so now I want to kind of get to this part of the Urantia book. So imagine that you've got, about um, 70 or 80 chapters of the life of Jesus, over 700 pages. And it's a lot like the New Testament, but it's much more detail. It's just glorious detail. Anything you can think of, like the wedding of Cana. Remember the wedding of Cana, turning water into wine. And it gives you all the detail about that explains it as a true miracle. Even though the Urantia book is a modern, almost like scientific text, it says there were real miracles, there's supernatural miracle. And it would tell you it's got a whole chapter about the wedding at Cana rather than 2 paragraphs, right? So it's lovely to get these stories, completely filled in. The narration is fills in all of that, but there's all that going on throughout the text. But there's something unbelievable that it took me years to really figure out why they did this. But I was brought up Greek Orthodox, and we have a lot in common with Catholics, and personally, I love the Catholics, and particularly their theology. But the Orthodox has a strain that is unique to it, which we forget because they're over there in the East, right? They're in Russia, Greece, they're Eastern Europe. But the West is more focused on the traditional gospel of Jesus, which really comes out of Peter and Paul, and which is a narrowing of it. But the East has this lineage. And what the Urantia book does that I find fascinating is it's narrating the life of Jesus, and then it stops at a certain point and says, oh, well, there's this other thing that happened, which is, so I'm going to tell you what it is. And that is that at the very mature point of the life of and the teachings of Jesus, when the apostles were maturing and flowering, then it kind of stops, and there's this person that walks in basically, and they've just been they've been doing a tour of preaching in the area called the Decapolis, which is 10 cities around the River Jordan, and they were done with that, and they were camping, and walks in this distinguished philosopher from Alexandria. So remember where that is, right? That's Egypt, right? I mean, that's the main city in Egypt, where Cairo is, more or less, today. So that was, as you may know, a fantastic center of teaching, right? The Library of Alexandria, and this Greek-speaking population there that were, really comes out of Athens, and so they had these schools, And there was somebody there that that happened to have been evangelized by one of the apostle, not apostle, but a disciple of Jesus went there to who was Greek speaking, and he was teaching there, and he met this guy named Rodan, who was a distinguished philosopher, and the guy became a convert. And so, make a long story short, he made a trip to meet Jesus, right? So, it's not there very far from there. I took a bus one time from Jerusalem to Cairo. It's not that, 3 hours, something like that. So if you were to take a donkey or something or a wagon, it would take maybe 10 hours. So he goes to find Jesus, and he does, and he finds him with the whole entourage, and they're in this town, and he walks in and says, "Hi, I'm Rodan. I'm a philosopher from and a lot of these guys spoke Greek. Jesus spoke Greek according to the Urantia Book. So he's introducing himself and says, "I want to know your teachings better." And so Jesus treats him with grace and receives him. And then he says, "Look, we're actually on our way to Jerusalem. I want you to stay here with my two philosophical apostles." So guess who they are? Thomas and Nathaniel. So he appoints them to stay with this guy, Rodan. And so, make a long story short, Rodan had prepared lectures, right? He's a professor. So he gives lectures to these two apostles. And all the disciples that were still around all gathered, and there's a whole week of lectures. And those are in the Urantia book, this guy's lectures. So it's not Jesus lecturing. The rest of it is all about Jesus. Here's two big chapters of this Greek guy giving lectures about the art of living, but it says he's a convert. He believes in the gospel, right? So he says, "Look, you guys have this great gospel. You have this great teacher, but I'm a thinker. I'm a philosopher. I'm in the Greek lineage of Plato, and I'm trying to make sense of this. So this is how I make sense of it." So Nathaniel and Thomas are, kind of sitting at his feet, and what they do is they give commentary as he gives his teaching. So what the authors of the Urantia book do, and it's important to know this if you're being introduced to it, is that the authors are celestial beings, we're told, purportedly, right? So they take these kind of a transcript of what really happened, and they translate it into phraseology of English. It's a big translation, right? And the modern mentality. So they took this transcript, which they claimed was an angelic record, like a Akashic record of what happened, and they condensed it and put it into English. So that's what these chapters do. So I'm going to tell you now about what this art of living is. And it's built, of course, on what Rodan already believed, which was the core gospel, right? Which you couldn't get a better teacher of that than Thomas and Nathaniel, who were very articulate, well-educated, deep thinkers, right? So they keep reminding him, this is our teaching, this is what we believe, and he said, "Yes, I dig it. So now I'm going to add to it Greek philosophy, 500 years of development from Socrates and Plato and Aristotle. All of this comes down into this guy." So he gives this lecture, and he says, "Look, your gospel, which is the fatherhood of God, the parenthood of God, the mother, father, creator God, is at the center of our lives, each individual. And then the second part of the gospel is that because of that, we're all sisters and brothers. So it's the fatherhood, motherhood of God, and the brotherhood, sisterhood of man. Or, to use ancient sexist language, it's the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man. So that's your gospel, and it's a lot of depth in that, because if there is this relationship, it's like a parent, right? It's like a parent and a child. So you are a child, but you're more than a child. You're a son, you're a daughter of this God, right? So, and then it has certain prerogatives, which is you treat each other with ethically, and you live according to the golden rule, and that you forgive one another and you love one another. This is what God does, and so we are in that lineage of the Spirit. So that's the teaching. But he says, in addition to this, you need to be philosophical. You know, you can't just have doctrine. You need deep thinking. So that's what I find exciting here is because it's adapted to the modern mind. In the modern mind, we have already assimilated, really Plato, Aristotle, it's in our tradition. It's, the Greek mind was able to tease out some very, very important things that this guy, is now fusing with the gospel of Jesus. And the Urantia book is approvingly presenting that. And I'll read you just one of these I get the right glasses, one of these passages. And this has to do with something like, by way of introduction, think of Barbara Marx Hubbard just talked a lot about Maslow and Maslow's hierarchy, right? So there are 5 levels, and I think he added more, but basic levels, right? The physical needs. Everybody has biological physical needs. Number one. Number two, everybody needs safety. You need to feel safe. You need to have housing, safe from attack, from violence, right? So then level 2, everybody needs relationship. You need friendship. You need family life. Number 4, you have self-esteem, self-respect, and then 5, self-actualization, right? So these, obvious, in a way, obvious things that everybody needs. You need the first 4 to get to self-actualization. So this is what we're actually getting here in an interesting language. I'm going to just read to you because it's unique. And this has to do with, well, I'll just read it. It says, human life consists in 3 great drives. 3 great drives: urges, desires, and lures. Strong character, commanding personality is only acquired by converting the natural urge of life into the social art of living. That's number 1. There's actually 3. So you're converting the urge of life, the animal urge, you might say, into the art of living. Number 2 is by transforming. Number 2, you're transforming your desires, your longings, your present desires in the present moment. I want wealth. I want love. I want food. You're transforming that into higher longings, more advanced longings, such as I want to be a concert pianist. I want to be a social scientist. I want to run for Senate. These are higher desires, right? So you're rising up of these present immediate desires to more lasting and fulfilling goals and desires. So that's number 2, right? So number 1 again is the art of living above animal urges and beyond it. Number 2 is transforming desire to higher goals. And number 3 is that the lures that you have, lures being the real incentives, the ideas you have about your goals. You have these ideas, right? So let's say you're very conventional and you live in the suburbs and you're just conventional. And your ideas are things like, oh, I want to own a house, and I want to have 2 trees in the backyard, and I want to have a good car. Those are lures that you work for. But this is saying that we want to transfer these more conventional ideas into the higher realms of unexplored ideas and undiscovered ideals. So so again, what is your lure? What is motivating you to get out of bed in the morning, right? It's cliche, but what really is it? Is it I'm getting out of bed to get in my car to get to work so I can get some money so I can pay the mortgage? If that's your lure, that's okay. It's conventional life. But if your lure is you'd like to see the earth transformed and have peace on earth and no more war, now that's a higher motivation for your life. And that's like if you're living at the Catholic worker house, you've got a higher, your motive is higher. It's for world peace. It's for a loving community. So those are the 3 parts of the art of living. And we say art because you, you can go too far with some of these things, right? You might get too energetic about it. You might even get fanatical about it, and you lose touch with facts, right? So we don't want fanaticism. We don't want to create a cultism, where people give up everything in order to achieve higher ideals. I mean, sometimes you can do that if it's grounded. A monastery is like that, but it's grounded. You've got a roof over your head. You've got a brotherhood, a sisterhood with you. So that's not a fanatic activity. But creating a cult out of nothing is a fanatic activity that, it's understandable, because people are attracted to these higher ideals of transformation of the planet. So, we applaud that, but we want to have balance. So that's why we call it the art of living, wise living. And in these pages, and it's for those who want to look it up, it's paper 160 and paper 161 in the Urantia Book. And we want to we lost my train of thought here. We want to make this artistic in that you're achieving energy, enough energy to power this so that you can attain higher goals than mundane goals and conventional thinking, but not too much that you go overboard, that you cause problems and you cause conflict by being overly radical, right? So the art of living here really comes down to a couple of things that we get in this section, which is that the best way to achieve this is what I find perhaps most attractive about the Urantia teaching, which is it's like a combination of Eastern thought, Eastern mysticism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, with what we used to call Christianity. Because in this section it says Jesus was the paragon of balanced living, and of somebody who took his his needs, his physiological, biological, psychological needs, and translated them into a life of perfection. So he did this, but he did it in a balanced way. And the way he did it was by learning the art of conversation, the art of relationship, and perfecting it. And in addition, by being a deep mystic. So this depicts Jesus as a mystic in the healthiest sense of a mystic, not an isolated mystic who's, you know, quirky and eccentric. No, he was among his friends all the time, but he would very often leave the apostles and go off into meditation. And you don't see too much of that in the Bible, but you see a lot of that in the Urantia Book. And even this section says, here we are talking about all this stuff, and putting out energy. But Jesus right now is up in the hills over there and he's meditating, and we're putting out energy, but he's taking in power from the divine. And that is the secret. That is what a lot of us, decided to become Buddhists. I did, but it's in the Christian tradition. And just the capstone of that is that this is why I like this guy Rodan, because Rodan is the first, is the lineage holder, like the root guru of the Eastern Church. And the Eastern Church maintained this tradition of deep meditation that was not really carried forth in the Western Church, which is more focused on ritual, on sacraments, on legalistic morality, right? Except in the monasteries, maybe a Cistercian monastery, they're in deep contemplation for sure. But really, it's the Eastern tradition, and especially expressed in Russia, is one of deep inner contemplation, meditation, worship, communion, right? So it's mainly in the monasteries, but not only. It blossoms in Russia in the 19th century, as you may know. And this is known as the Theosis tradition. So I want to highlight that we're starting to run out of time here. So I have the one last point I want to make about this section, which is very, very important and very interesting. And that is the notion of personality. And this is a theological idea, but it's also a very down-to-earth idea. It's the idea that all around you are people who are made in the image of God. And what do we mean by that? Well, what we mean is God is in the image of person. You know, it's the original person, right? So personhood is the original, is from the original personhood. But what do we mean by that? How do we know what that is? Well, we know something because we're not, this is not Islamic in the sense there's a single deity. There are three deities, right? There are three. Why three? Because God is personal, and personality means community, because you can't become a person by yourself. You have to have parents. You have to have a source. You have to have community. You have to have a relationship in order to be a person. So personhood is really what deity is. And this is different than much of, say, Greek philosophy, like Plato, for example, was not clear about this. Aristotle was not. So they were more focused on the sort of God is one, the one, right? Particularly Neoplatonism, the one, which is impersonal. So it doesn't really come to you and love you. So this is a great principle that is inspiring and energizing to know that deity is a person that you can relate to deeply, is actually in you, is dwelling in you, gifting you with this indwelling spirit. And this spirit is what powers the art of living, right? Because you're being guided to be wise, meaning balanced, right? So it's not just something you make up. You're actually feeling within what is beautiful in this moment. What's the beautiful thing to do? Because beauty is art, right? So we're talking about the art of living. Beautiful living is balanced living, it's appropriate living, and it's wise living. It's dealing with facts, right? So again, this is how we prevent going overboard into being too fervent or too visionary, right? Because facts are facts. So beauty means you're in touch with the facts, but you're also in touch with the ideals. And it's a combination. Really, as wisdom is ideals reconciled with facts, facts reconciled with ideals. So in conclusion, really the art of living as a feature of the gospel of Jesus is a philosophic standard of living, really, when you come down to it. We all need to be philosophers. We all need to think this through. We need to feel it in our heart and think it in our minds. But it's exalted thinking, it's sublime thinking, it's prayerful thinking. Thinking in our literally prayer is super thinking, you might say. So that is the philosophic piece. And the Urantia book basically tells us that there's a lineage, there's a Western lineage of Christianity, and there's an Eastern lineage of Christianity, which really has elements of Buddhism, really, when you think about it. That's in this theosis tradition, deep meditation. It's not just monastic. So it's now blossoming, this deification as being perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect, as it says, I think, Matthew 5. That this is the ideal, and when you tune into the ideal, this infinite eternal source, then all of your issues really fall away, your prejudices, your biases, your narrowness, because you've devoted your life to something. You're now tuned into something that's universal, absolute, infinite, eternal, benevolent, all loving, omniscient. That's you're identifying with that. So you're bound to become successful in your life and live a beautiful life, which the beauty is the door to these attainments, that live in our eternal life as well, and blossom in our eternal life. So I'll leave it there, and I thank you for giving me all this time, and let's have some dialogue, comments.
Yeah, I'm gonna thank you, Byron. I just took a lot of notes there because there's a lot of wisdom, trying to capture it as best I can. I want to back all the way up to when you were introducing the Rodan Institute, and you said three topics. One pointing attention to the Urantia book itself,
Right.
and then I really didn't get the other two. Talking about part 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I, just want to make sure I have that clear.
Yeah, there were four parts to the Urantia book, but three
Yeah.
points I wanted to make. So it was a lot of permutations. But right, point one is that the Urantia book is something to contend with. It's possibly an epical revelation, and there's a million copies that have been distributed. So there's a lot to think about here, and see what you. But I would say start with part 4. So that's the first point.
Okay.
Second point is that really it's about the gospel of Jesus being enhanced and corrected. I didn't get into the things in more particulars about what was corrected, but it's being corrected for the modern and postmodern and post-postmodern age. It's being adapted to our modern needs, right? So that's the second point. And then the third point is the point about personality, that deity and our spiritual lives are wrapped around our personhood and the preciousness, uniqueness of the individual person, and the fact that deity is a person is a lot more than a person, but deity is personal to you. Like in the meditation we did, deity comes to you, comes from within and also from without. Deity can incarnate and be a person walking the earth, but also is within you. So those are the three principles.
Okay, very good. And I'm going to let anyone who wants to ask a question here. I always have many. Margot says the balance brings in the Eastern yin yang balance, male, female, sun, moon, homeostasis of the body. And
I like that.
she also said she also thought Jesus had some Eastern influences. Did he have specific Eastern in part 4? There's a lot of story of Jesus going to India, but
Yeah.
I don't think that happened. I think he traveled with some Indians. But how did this Eastern influence come in?
Yeah, there's two big parts or two big influences. One is that he did in fact travel with two Indians. When before his public ministry, he by happenstance runs into a very, very wealthy Indian merchant and his son. And the merchant hires him to be the tutor to his son, and they travel for months. And that is how Jesus got to see the entire Mediterranean world and went to all the major cities where this guy was making business deals. And in fact, they meet Emperor Tiberius. They go to Rome and they meet the emperor, and Jesus speaks with the emperor. So he's with these Indians who are, Hindus, so he gets almost like a year with them. Secondly, a bit later, still in his private life, it says that he was hired to run a caravan. The caravan went pretty far east, but not basically to where Persia is today.
Mhm.
But another part I think is very much worth knowing. The missing years in Jesus' life, where the Urantia book fills in all the missing years, all of them. I mean, even if you think it's fiction, it's fun to read. And it says that he was indeed a carpenter. He was also a metal worker and a leather worker, and he had like a shop, but it was in a place where there's a lot of trading coming through the Palestine, and the town that they were in near Nazareth, where he had the shop, was everyone from everywhere. They came from the Far East, they come from Africa. So for years he was meeting people from all religions. And he was a genius. He absorbed everything. So yeah, I think he knew all about Buddhism, for example.
Wonderful. And Sheila has a question. Does the term art of living overlap or connect with the organization founded by Ravi Shankar?
Didn't know about that, but I don't know. Probably it's similar teaching because uh, it's been taught by many. Eric Fromm was another one. It's just so many have taught the art of living as beauty being the door, beauty meaning balance, right? So a beautiful picture has balance of elements and color, right, and form. A beautiful symphony has balance and of four movements, and one movement's adagio, one's allegro, so you have balance, right? So yeah, I don't know about Ravi Shankar. I'd love to find out about that piece, but thanks for the question.
Okay, and is there a relationship to A Course in Miracles?
Not directly, but there's a lot of Urantia students are also course students, and I have this study group where we have a very advanced course student in our study group, and so we get a lot of enhancement from what she says, because the course is deeper on certain points
Mm-hmm.
than the Urantia book. The Urantia book's more of a narration of the life, but of course, the Course in Miracles is a very deep delving into psychology of spirituality. So I would say that 10% of Urantia people are and I too deeply respect the course, but it has a very different job, because the Urantia book is
Right.
straightening out our history, like the history of the planet, right? The course doesn't do
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And yeah, A Course in Miracles is, more about, I call it spiritual psychotherapy to
Yeah,
wake you
which
up
we
to
need.
who you are. Exactly. We need
It's totally great. Yeah, right.
mega doses of that. And
but we need it.
yeah, I love them both. They came through very differently, right? One was actually through Helen Schuckman, heard a voice, and that's what brought through, then did the automatic writing of the Course in Miracles. And how would you say that the Urantia book came through?
Well, my view is based on my research, and there's two or three schools of thought. Basically the evidence is that the chapters, of which there are 196, appeared. They were not channeled. This is not channeled stuff.
Right.
And I've published a whole lot of channeled stuff, and this is far superior language, and nobody could channel this way. So it is stated in some of the evidence that the chapters miraculously appeared. When they appeared, they were typed up, then they were read, and for 20 plus years, they were in channeling relationship with the celestials. They would read these papers that would materialize, and then they would send questions, and there was like these channels that sent these questions to the celestials, and then they would materialize a second draft in answer to the
Wow.
questions. But there are others that contest that.
Oh,
uh,
really?
the materialization, but it's a minority, and there's a new book coming out about that. But generally, everybody agrees that it's not like somebody channeling from their mind, because it doesn't have the air marks of human biases, prejudices
I always
that I
like
could.
where they say, we're going to try to rephrase this now in like terminology that you can understand now. And what I really like about the Urantia book is that it's evolutionary. I think that's one
Yes.
of the main things, is that, as you said, trying to correct some of the gospel stories, and some of them just seemed so childish. And so it's like, okay, we're going to bring you information that can involve your understanding of what the real message was, and fill in some more information for you. So I just love that, also how it brings in all the cosmology and so much that Urantia talked about, but then wasn't discovered for another couple decades, or three
Right.
decades later. It's
Yeah.
really astounding when you really dive into it deeply, as I've learned from you and in my own reading. But I do have a
Yeah.
question from a person that says, I understand there were three Jesuses. Does the Urantia speak of these three, or perhaps Yeshua dash 1, 2? So I think maybe you're referring to the different names that people have, the Hebrew name for Jesus. What do you get on that, Byron?
I don't know what it means to say three Jesuses. I don't know if it means three persons or three names, but he's
Okay.
got a lot of names. So I mean, it's just one historic person. I don't think historians doubt there was this one person.
Okay.
Yeah, atheists would doubt it, but there's evidence that there was this person, and there is the largest religion in the world that came out of this guy,
Right.
so I don't know about three Jesus. I'd like to have three Jesuses. That'd be even better.
Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about the Gospels.
Yeah.
I was talking with Father Joe earlier and talking about, they weren't written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Yeah.
Yeah, talk about a little bit about that's what, we were all told to memorize and had our questions about. But what would you say, when did the Gospels come about? And are they probably the truest parts of the Bible? Or, as Father Joe says, everything in the Bible is true and some of it actually happened?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about the Old Testament, everything being true in the Old Testament, but I mean, in the New Testament, it's, pretty reliable, although I think there are embellishments that are kind of a big deal that one needs to think about. But, the letters of Paul are pretty authentic because, we have these manuscripts, but, there's, a huge, scholarly debate about the texts of the four synopt of the Gospels, So I'm not a scholar of that area, but let's put it this way: it's something important to know. Say for a Catholic priest or monk, that there are a lot of Catholics that like the Urantia Book, and there's one in particular that we could introduce to him, who's a monastic in Canada, is a friend of mine, and he secretly reads the Urantia Book for the last 40 years. But that back to the issue of the Gospels, right? So the Gospels are source texts for the Urantia Book. So imagine that you're writing a dissertation. You have the four Gospels, you have the four New Testament Gospels, and you're now going to write this for the modern age, but not cancel anything, just enhance everything, but remove a couple of big errors. And the biggest error according to the Urantia Book is the blood atonement doctrine.
Okay, can you elaborate on that one?
That's really of origin from Paul, and it's the idea that Jesus had to die and shed blood for our salvation. So it's a blood relation, the blood itself. Protestants, make a big deal, but also Catholics, and Orthodox too, that I grew up with, that the sacrifice had to happen for the redemption of mankind because God was not reconciled to us until his son died on the cross, right? So the Ranch Book says in its crude form, that is a major error, theological error, because it states that God has to be appeased by the death of his son, which is not a very high, not kind of a gross idea. But you can, so that says that there's a couple of things that are really missing in the Christian view cosmologically. One is that has to do with the Trinity, and the other has to do with the blood atonement. We get into the Trinity, but that's a little bit more arcane. I hope that helps.
I think it does. Can you think of anything else that, what about the Immaculate Conception and birth? Is that something that's they've got all wrong? Is that another error, big error, or how do we
Yeah,
understand that from your Urantia point of view? Are
actually,
you
another one
able
of
to go
the
there?
they don't make a big point of it because the modern mind, Catholics really like that idea for a good reason. It's symbolic of the feminine, the presence of the divine feminine. So it's a very good symbol, right? That Mary was like the divine feminine, uh, and that's beautiful, right? But the notions that that of the virgin birth it states is just not the case because God can conceive of His Son in the womb of a woman in a natural way. God can do that. She doesn't have to be a virgin. So it doesn't spend a lot of time on that. But so if that's your doctrine that you think is literally the case, then this would be a challenge for you. But symbolically, it's the case. But I think it's very important to point out to all Catholics that the Urantia Book tells us that in the cosmology that Jesus has a female consort. It's not just Christ. It's Christ and the mother, and we call her the mother spirit. That they are co-equal, and they were created from the beginning, so that it's not a male situation here. There's a male female, and that's a more advanced thing to get into. But the mother relation, we have a relationship with the mother, who is the source of the Holy Spirit. She is the source of the Holy Spirit. She is. Jesus Christ is the source of the Spirit of truth. So there's two spirits, not one. And one comes from the feminine and one comes from the masculine. They have different functions. And there's more to say, but that's how the Urantia book transmutes this wonderful idea of Mary, and says, yeah, not only that, but there's a pre-existing feminine consort of Jesus, of Christ.
Very good. I'm going to put this in gallery view. I'm going to ask Sheila, and I know Christy also is here. She's been with you on the shows before. So let me just put this in gallery view. And if anybody wants to go ahead and unmute or ask a question, I've been kind of dominating here to me to do that, but okay. Sheila, did you want to jump in here?
Sure.
I'll ask you to unmute. And
I'm thoroughly enjoying this synopsis of the section I didn't read, so thank you for that. I think I'm going to go back and listen to it on the audio.
Oh yeah, the audio is great. Yeah.
Get all the details. Yeah, this is. I've been diving into lots of different, just on my own, versions of what all of these books and stories mean, and at the end of the day, I think in some ways they all come back to some basic messages, and so it's always enlightening to hear this approach along with others.
Great.
mm-hmm.
Good
Very good. And
to meet you.
You said, I've heard the Gospels may have come from church groups founded around the different apostles as they taught about their individual histories.
Yeah. You can get a PhD in this, and but generally it was not written by those particular, except the Gospel of John, we think was written by John himself. Yeah, but it was edited. Yeah, and it was dictated to a scribe.
Right, he had an assistant, didn't he? And he lived the longest of all the apostles, if I remember correctly. And
totally did. I mean, they all pretty much died young, but he lived to the late 90s. So
right,
yeah.
Very, very unusual. But Janice, good to see you here. If anyone else would like to join in the conversation.
I'm just disappointed I missed the beginning. I had computer problems.
Oh.
Well, there'll be a replay, and I'll have to listen to that. I used to, for years, I studied the Urantia book with Mo Siegel. You may know who he is, Byron.
I certainly do. Wow.
Yeah, I lived in Boulder, and so I was there every week, and a member of the women's corps. We had a women's group that did a lot of service work. For some reason, he liked my voice, and he always asked me to read.
You do. You have a good voice narration.
I don't know. He said I should, go into reading books on audiobooks or whatever. Anyway, my Urantia book is, I live at my 95-year-old mother's, and I took it out of storage a while back and started flipping through it a bit, and it's been calling to me. And so I had this on my calendar for a while, but we were gone. Anyway, I'm sorry I missed it. I will listen to the replay.
Janice, I have a study group that's for folks that are not advanced, but newer or intermediate. So if you'd like to join it, just email me.
Okay, I need to get your email.
Every other Tuesday.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll come back to me, but it's been a while since I've really dived into it. But I did for years.
You couldn't have a better mentor than Mo Siegel, the founder of Celestial Seasonings Tea, and he's now the president of the Urantia Foundation.
Yeah, and he's actually doing, it was my idea to get him to do Zooms. He wasn't doing them. And then I had moved, but I was like, I miss the Urantia book. Anyway, so now I really feel like I'm being called back again. Yeah, it was
I hope so.
wonderful.
Yeah, everybody's doing it on Zoom now, you know. So you'd find about 50 Zoom, you know, so mine's one of 50
It was a
Zoom.
wonderful community in Boulder. We had an extraordinary community.
Boulder was the world epicenter of the Urantia movement for many years. It probably still is.
It's like 15 years for me or something. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Janice, now Byron has started his RodanInstitute.org.
Yeah, so I didn't get to, I guess I didn't
Yeah,
ask
you'll get
questions
that
because they're
on
on
the
there.
replay.
Yeah,
We'll have the
yeah, I
replay
can't,
up.
yeah.
Yeah, and Christy, you asked about the Holy Sophia in the mag. Is that
In
One thing I've appreciated about the Urantia book is the attempt to balance and bring in the relationship of the divine feminine.
Christy. Hi,
Hey!
Christy.
I was wondering when you'd notice.
Oh my God, no. I have my glasses on. Hi.
Yeah,
Oh, how nice.
yeah, good to see you. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
I
sorry
know.
we fell out of touch. Yeah, but good to hear. Yeah,
Yeah,
what you gonna say about the
you're
Sophia?
back east still.
Yeah, I live back in Washington. I live in Washington, D.C. of all places.
Oh, wow. You're in the
Yeah,
epicenter right now.
I am.
Oh, boy.
Yeah,
Stay
it's
safe. Oh,
very
yeah,
tense. But yeah, so as you know, Christy, the Ranch book has this very strong sense of the feminine, divine feminine.
yeah.
And then I'll add that, you know, since the Ranch book came through, there's been new channels that have
Oh,
added enhancements. It's a controversial topic. But for over 30 years, there's been additional materials that have come through. But these are real channelings, right? They're actual channelings.
mhm.
And, and so the women who are channeling, and as you know, Christy, Donna D'Angelo channeled a book that I was supposed to send you, and I didn't get to send it to you. I promise that I will. But
Oh, that'd be great.
this is a miraculous event. Donna's very clairvoyant, really the most clairvoyant person we have. And the 12 apostles were male, right? So the Urantia book teaches that there were 12 female apostles, 12
Right.
female apostles, and they covered it up. So the 12 female apostles were the real thing, and they had a different job than the men, right? And in those days, you know, men could go out and do things in public, you know, so women had to be more discreet, but they were really ministering big time, mainly to other women. But what happened is they contacted Donna, they being these 12 women. Donna had contact with 12
Wow.
of them, and for 20 years they've been trying to get her to channel them. And she was like, I can't do that. That's like too much. I mean, so 20 years into it, she finally did that. And each one tells their story.
It's
And so
fascinating.
brought it to me as a publisher, and we put it out about a year and a half ago.
Mhm.
And it's a
Here we
spectacular
go.
book.
I'm going to
The
pin.
most
Yeah, I think Noel, you had her on
you had her on, Noel, right? So
Yeah.
that's
a while
Yeah,
back.
and
I
Margot's
caught a
showing
little.
her, she has her copy of the book, The Women Who Love Jesus.
yeah,
And
it's
we've had Donna on several times because,
that's since she's talked about it. Yeah.
yeah, it's really fascinating. And, you know, that's why, you know, get so frustrated with everyone is all about Jesus and
Right.
thinking like, do you listen to what he taught? You know, he was so, you know, he honored the women, he valued them just as much as the male, you know, he was, you know, a fabulous teacher of just accepting everyone where they were, regardless. And that isn't happening so much in our society. And,
I
you know,
know I'm involved right now in teaching a course on the current modern day suppression of women. And I'm working with a couple of co-authors. You know, one of them, Dan Craig Morris, you know, Dan, up
I
in
do.
Sebastopol. He just came out with his book on the Holy Sophia, a lot of his research through the Pistis Sophia
Right.
material, the Gnostic material. And he's somebody, Noel, you might want to have on your show.
okay, just give me
The divine,
contact. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
the divine spark. But his partner is Diana Kelly, who had an apparition of the Holy Sophia appear to her, and it was quite remarkable. And so we're doing a series right now that has to do with the current modern day suppression that's going on. Because I don't know if you heard, Congressman Josh Hawley just came out with the statement and said it would be such a beautiful thing if women would just kind of step aside, and this effort, which is a little disheartening, about stripping away women's rights and getting into just the marginalizing and dehumanizing of the feminine. It's
Yes.
I'm shocked at being at this age in my life that we're still having wars. It's like, why are we even interested, or why are we supporting this? Why how is this that it can be, but I guess the evolution, which is the other part about the Urantia book, which I loved, is the evolution component of seeing that we're evolving. We still have a long way to go, I guess. Byron, I would love your take on that, how you think we're doing evolutionary wise, because
Well, it wasn't one of our topics tonight, but maybe another time. A very, very important thing right now is for folks to know that the Urantia book reveals about who Lucifer was, who Satan was, scary stuff, right? Not a pleasant topic, but my last book is actually about that. A new book I did last year. But that the Lucifer rebellion is the core issue at the heart of the problem. This is an angelic rebellion that we've been hearing about. Ancient aliens and people like that talk about, these fallen angels, the Anunnaki, and the Nephilim and all that. So the Urantia book has a massive revelation about what that is, going back. And it's an alternate narrative, it's the narration that you get from Sitchin, Zechariah Sitchin, competes with the Urantia narration, which has more depth to it, in my view. And my next book's actually about that. But this is the high point of the expression of the Luciferic, kind of like Rudolf Steiner, talks about what he calls the Ahrimanic, right? So this is its final gasp, and it's a backward movement in order to go forward again, right? So we have these wars, and any moment we could have a huge war in the Middle East that would be very, very bad, right? And this is a final expression of this Luciferic party, you might say. It's like a global cult,
right,
that has Satan as one of its representatives, right? So their approach to solving problems is, bombing women and children from the sky.
Yeah.
So this is very demonic stuff. So we had a demonic kind of issue on the planet, but everybody should know that it's rare for a planet to have this. We have a rare planet here, which is why the Urantia book is important, to explain why Jesus came here, because Jesus could have gone to other planets to incarnate. He doesn't incarnate on every planet. There's one planet. So he came here because we were among the worst planets in his universe. And you can see it right now. You can see it in the way we treat each other. And in the kind of collapse of the environment, that this isn't normal. Nuclear war is not normal.
No.
The planets throughout the universe do not have nuclear wars.
Right.
Certain planets have had a regression. It basically says 1 in a million inhabited planets is like ours. So, but that's a whole other topic for another time, maybe.
Wow.
I think Donna's going to talk about that on the next interview. Actually.
Yeah, she did.
Yeah.
She did.
That was my next question, because I know you, there'd be another book in you coming out.
Yeah. Well, but actually, my last book was on the theology of evil, and it's called Truths About Evil, Sin, and the Demonic. So, it's kind of a rough book to get into, but
How did you survive writing it?
Actually got depressed writing it.
I bet. I
You
bet.
know, because you have to kind of, tease out what theologians have said about evil. And one important point that we were making, Noel, earlier, that the Urantia Book is evolutionary. So it's an important point here because,
Right.
see, in Christianity, we don't have a way of explaining evil until we got to Teilhard de Chardin. That's why Barbara made a big point about Teilhard, right? Because if there isn't an evolutionary aspect of deity, you can't really explain evil. Because if God is absolute and that's it, God's absolute, loving, great, omniscient, benevolent God, well, then how come God permits the Holocaust? What kind of a love is that to permit
Yeah.
that, right? So the way you got to see, the Urantia Book and Teilhard and Whitehead, if you read that kind of thing, is that deity evolves with us in space and time. It's evolving. That Teilhard was a revelation, right? The deity evolves right toward the omega, and the Urantia Book has the same teaching. So that's how you can explain evil, because deity is not perfected in space-time. Deity is perfect outside of time.
Right.
It's in the eternal realm. It's perfect. It's what we call the central universe, right? But we're not in the central. We're in the outer area where it's evolving, which is beautiful too. And we
Yeah,
need to achieve art of living in order to, make it here.
Right.
Yeah.
Like if you can make it in this planet, you can make it anywhere. It's like a song. It's like New York, you make it here, you can
New
make it
York of the
anywhere.
universe. The
Right, we're the New York.
New York of the mansion world.
In a
Yeah,
way,
it makes me wonder why we volunteer to be here. I have to remind myself every now and then. But yes, we have choice. We have freedom of choice, and I guess that's one of the big things I learned through the A Course in Miracles, is that we're trying to project everything onto God, all these things that happen, versus taking our own responsibility of, what ourselves as creators of what's going on. And, it's, why is God getting a bad rap for all this stuff? He gave us free will.
well, that's the thing, that when I got to know Barbara Mark Hubbard pretty well, we had differences about theology because, I liked in a way where she was going, where we're in the sense that she said, well, God has like this wound. Didn't she ever say that to you?
I think
And
in her Hunger of Eve book, she did.
yes,
Yeah.
but she and I used to take these walks. The reason being, we were trying to develop chapters to her book, and she was, by talking it out, then she'd go back and write it. And but that's where I realized that Barbara, has this view that deity has this dark side, which I totally get. It seems like it, right? So this is theology where you got to work this out in theology. So the Urantia Book solves this, I think, better than anything I've seen, and I spent years working on this theology of evil. That the deity, that there's levels, right? There's a level of perfection, there's a dimension, the highest dimension, and there's a level of space-time evolution. So we're evolutional, and the Urantia Book is an evolutionary revelatory text. I want to add one thing before we close about
Sure.
that.
Yes.
That the ostensible, the big purpose of living and the philosophy of living that we didn't talk about is the development of a soul which is evolving. So the Christians and other religions have a big confusion, according to the Urantia Book, which is that we're born with a spirit, right? And it's God. We're born with this. It's the image of God. And so that's why we're precious. But the Urantia Book says there's two parts to that. One part is the spirit of God within you, the light within you, that doesn't change. But there's a part of that that breeds the soul, which is the evolving part, which is based on your experience. So every time you have an important experience, the spirit in you hits the save button, saves it. Each what we call soul-making event in your life? Anything poignant, anything important? Not which hot dog you ate, but a moral choice or
Mhm.
those are the things that are remembered in eternity. They become your eternal soul. So it's your experiences, your achievements. The save button is hit each time. And the save button is the God within saying, "Oh, I like that one. Save that. Put that into the soul." So you have two parts there. There's the spirit and the soul. The soul evolves, the spirit does not evolve. So we are here really that's why we chose to come into a messed up place, is that the soul making opportunities are much greater here than a normal planet, because you got these tough problems, almost impossible to solve.
Yeah.
I was at a meeting at the United Nations. I'm a consultant of this company. They sent me there. You want to see some problems to solve? That place is a mess. They had the Ukraine war. And they're trying to solve it, and it's soul making because it's almost impossible to solve. And if in good spirit and with a good heart you try to solve an impossible problem, the soul grows and it becomes robust. And so that's really the purpose of the
Mhm.
art of living that we've been talking about.
So, Byron, could there be peace on earth?
Well, since you asked that, the people have sent me to the UN. It's a company that's trying to develop radical UN reform.
Oh, yes. Mhm.
Believe it or not, that the Urantia book, I mean, there's all these wild things about the Urantia book. So it says if Jesus were alive today, he would favor a world federation, a world government. And so he would not favor the United Nations.
Right.
The United Nations exalts nations, and nations go to war. Nations should give up their war-making powers. And it actually puts this in the mouth of Jesus saying that. So if Jesus were around today, this is what he would say about politics. He would say, there will be world peace when everybody gives up their right to make war, but you all have to do it at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's called a democratic world federation.
Yeah, Ukraine gave up their nuclear weapons, and that put them between a rock and a hard place.
Oh, well, that's a big topic for another day, maybe.
Yes.
But the principle is that, if God is our sovereign, right? And so by virtue of that, we're all come out of the source. So we're equal. So if we're all equal, we're brothers and sisters. And if we're brothers and sisters, we should have a big family, and the big family should have its own government, right? And it should be a democratic government, and you should elect them. And then if you elect them, they will abolish war, just like they abolished slavery. So it's based on the gospel of Jesus. Based on the gospel of Jesus, there should be a world government that abolishes war. You outlaw it, and nobody can do it. It's against the law.
Right.
So that's what we have to hope for and pray for.
Right. So Janice is singing to us, imagine there's no country. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. Perfect way to end. Thank you, Janice.
Yeah,
Thank you, Byron, everyone for
Thank you,
coming.
everybody.
Been
Hope
delightful.
stay in touch with me, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Yes. Good
God bless
night.
you.
Thank you, and may peace prevail on earth.
Yeah.
May it be
May
so.
all the governments declare peace.
May it be so. Let's make
Yeah.
it.
May
Amen.
peace prevail on
It's
earth.
just begun with us right here.
Yes.
Let it
That's
unify
right.
and ripple out.
Inside.
It's an inside job, right?
There you-
That was a brilliant
Amen to that.
closing statement, Brian. That was the synopsis that you put forth was brilliant.
Well, thank you.
It's really incredible, because that's what, I mean, Noel and Bob and Janet, we're all on the Unity.Earth group, and this is the conversation about how do we bring peace, and Romel, I think I thought Romel was on here, and
Yeah, Noreen.
they're trying to do it in
Noreen,
Pakistan.
it's like the middle of the night for you guys.
Yeah, no, there's
Like
Noreen,
3
yeah.
in the morning. What?